For most of our history, humans have been searching for some form of the Fountain of Youth, a magical body of water with the power to cure illness and reverse the aging process. But does it really exist? Sorry to disappoint, but probably not. Stories of the Fountain of Youth go back at least as far as the 5th century BC and the writings of the Greek historian Herodotus. Even Alexander the Great of Macedonia was said to have been looking for a river to turn back time when he conquered the Persian Empire. Flash forward to the Middle Ages, when Europeans believed that a ruler named PRESTER John presided over a far eastern kingdom that contained not only a fountain of youth, but a river of gold. But by far, the most famous searcher in history was the 16th century Spanish explorer Juan Ponce de León. León joined Christopher Columbus in 1493 as part of the renowned explorer's second trip to the New World. While in the Caribbean, he may have heard rumors of a magic fountain and river said by local Taino Indians to lie somewhere north of Cuba, on an island known as Bimini. After colonizing Puerto Rico, León set sail for the coast of Florida in 1513, a voyage allegedly motivated by his search for Bimini and the Fountain of Youth. As the story goes, he landed near St. Augustine, where a statue of him now stands in the central square. The story about León's search for the Fountain of Youth may be a staple of popular history, but there's not much truth to it. León probably wasn't even looking for the mythical fountain on his journey to Florida. No document from the time, including letters written by León himself, mentions such a goal for this voyage. What he really wanted was to capture land and resources, especially gold, for Spain. And it seems likely that later Spanish writers made up the Fountain of Youth story after his death, in order to portray him as foolish and gullible. That doesn't stop tens of thousands of visitors from visiting St. Augustine's Fountain of Youth Archaeological Park, a tourist attraction that has been open at least since 1901. So far, though, no one has ever gotten any younger from exposure to the sulfur-smelling waters of its natural spring. Whether it's a magic anti-aging cream or a miracle cure, many people haven't given up searching for the equivalent of the Fountain of Youth. But if history is any guide, they'll be looking for a very long time.
Italians have long celebrated Christopher Columbus in tribute to their shared heritage. In 1937, President Roosevelt proclaimed October 12th as Columbus Day. And in 1971, President Nixon declared Columbus Day a national holiday to be observed on the second Monday of October. Okay, and why? Because Columbus discovered America and proved that the Earth was round. Except he didn't need to. Greek mathematician Pythagoras suspected we were living on a sphere as early as the 6th century BC, and Aristotle backed him up 2 centuries later when he noticed the Earth's shadow could be seen during a lunar eclipse, sliding past the moon in miniature, and it was round. So why did Columbus bother getting off the couch at all? Money. In the 15th century, spices were a hot commodity. Traders shipping them between Asia and Europe could get rich quick. However, with the fall of Constantinople to the Turks, Europe lost its most popular route to the treasures of the East. Columbus realized his opportunity, become the first person to plot a western route to Asia and enjoy unprecedented glory and riches. Inconsistent maps made calculating routes difficult. Columbus finally charted a southwestern course he believed was short enough to keep him and his men from dying of starvation and thirst. Spain's Queen Isabella, eager to expand her empire, agreed to roll the dice on Columbus's route. So on that August morning in 1492, Columbus and his men sailed off in those famous ships, laden with hopes of finding their way to Asia and making both Spain and themselves a heck of a lot of money. After a pit stop in the Canary Islands, the charted world was behind them. Columbus had been right not to trust existing maps, but he didn't realize that his own plotted course to Asia was short by nearly 10,000 miles. Luckily, a series of islands, the future West Indies, lay almost exactly where he believed India to be, and the relieved sailors made landfall. This is where things get tricky. We're still not sure of the exact location where Columbus first landed, but he was convinced he'd made it to India and declared the route successful. Mission accomplished. The Indians who greeted him were actually an indigenous people who had lived there for centuries. So the claim that Columbus discovered the Americas is only true from a European perspective. But as far as Columbus was concerned, he was right where he'd expected to be. In an exotic land full of natives and spices. Columbus returned to the Spanish court a hero. All were convinced the route was a success, and it surely was, but not as they'd expected. Columbus inadvertently achieved the monumental task of joining the two hemispheres, in effect doubling the size of the habitable planet and establishing trade between the continents. So on Columbus Day, raise a glass to famed navigator Christopher Columbus, who missed the mark and hit it just the same.
Pilgrims came to New England because it seemed to be relatively empty. They could do whatever they wanted, no one would bother them. America represented a fresh page, and especially a clean slate. They just wanted to get out of England.
They came for freedom to create a godly city, a place where you could live a pure life, a perfect life under God's rules.
If the Pilgrims had known what they were in for, they almost certainly wouldn't have done it. They were really on their own, and they had this very tenuous lifeline back to England.
It was an incredibly inhospitable environment in terms of climate. New England, of course, had very cold weather in the winter, and so it was very, very difficult for the settlers early on.
And that first year was devastating for them. They were dying of starvation, they were dying of disease.
One of the things the Pilgrims discovered relatively early on was how little they knew about how to farm. What to farm, what kind of crops would grow well. They discovered that the Indians were farmers too. And because relations between the Pilgrims and the Indians were relatively good at the beginning, there was an exchange of technology.
And the Native Americans really helped them, and you have this period of cooperation between the two groups.
They learn that what you have to do is put the seed in the ground, but if you put a fish head along with that, it will grow much better.
Must have been a strange and curious and wonderful thing to see people using fish meal to make the soil more productive and things grow faster and more abundantly.
It is not just a one-way trade. There will also be the other way of new European crops coming into the New World.
But if it weren't for the Native American communities, the Pilgrims would have been wiped out.
The success of the Pilgrims and their descendants was beyond their imagination. And the country that emerged from this is one of the most successful in world history. So it's not at all surprising that Americans have this belief that America is exceptional.